It's not exactly a requiem for a Black Panther, but it's something close. Coming up on the best of Black History Year.
Ready to level up? Chumba Casino is your playbook to fun. It's free to play with no purchase necessary. Enjoy hundreds of online social games like blackjack, slots, and solitaire anytime, anywhere with fresh releases every week. Whether you're at home or on the go, let Chumba Casino bring the excitement to you. Plus, get free daily login bonuses and a free welcome bonus. Join now for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. Play Chumba Casino today. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. TNCs apply.
It was 1971 in Plainfield, New Jersey, where Ashanti Alston joined the Black Panther Party, radicalized in the wake of the 1967 Newark riots and Malcolm X's assassination years earlier. Ashanti would begin his life as an anarchist on that day, and it has guided his every step through the Black Panther Party, then the Black Liberation Army, his incarceration, and his work honoring the sacrifice of political prisoners in the name of Black liberation with the Jericho Movement. So it was that in January of 2023, Ashanti sat down with Jay to reconcile with his history as a Black anarchist on this episode of the Best of Black History Year.
In 1966, while Marvel Comics was debuting their first Black superhero, the Black Panther, the world was also introduced to one of the most influential Black power organizations of all time, the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. The Black nationalist group rose in direct opposition to the police brutality that pummeled members of nonviolent civil rights organizations. They demanded citizenship rights as well as economic and political power for our people, and they stopped at nothing to ensure it. This is Jay from PushBlack, and you're listening to Black History Year. Created in the segregated and poverty-stricken streets of Oakland by Huey Newton and Bobby Seals, the Black Panther Party would spread their influence across the country as satellite chapters were established in South Los Angeles, Detroit, New York, and Chicago. It was in Plainfield, New Jersey, though, in 1971, where our guest, Ashanti Alston, joined the Black Panther Party, radicalized in the wake of the 1967 Newark riots and the assassination of Malcolm X years earlier. Ashanti was politicized at a young age, and his growth continued through the Panther Party, then the Black Liberation Army, then his incarceration, and now his work honoring the sacrifice of political prisoners in the name of Black liberation with the Jericho Movement. Check out my conversation with Ashanti Alston on the history and future of Black political thought right after this look at the global impact of the Black Panther Party.
The impact of the Black Panther Party extends far beyond these United States. Their revolutionary example inspired oppressed people all around the world, in countries such as India, New Zealand, and China, to rise up and fight back. From the Aboriginals of Australia to Buddhists in India, the 1970s saw inspired marginalized groups form their own Panther parties to fight the system. Founded by first-generation Pacific Islander teens of immigrant parents who were threatened with deportation, police brutality, and economic discrimination, the Polynesian Panthers peacefully applied the Black Panthers' ideologies to enact change. Established by West African and West Indian immigrants, the British Black Panther Party's struggle was different from the American parties, who embattled a racism embedded into law. The BBP's fight responded to anti-Black and anti-immigrant sentiment all around the UK instead. Mizrahi Jews in Israel, who descended from North Africa, Central Asia, and the Middle East, were also inspired by the Black Panthers. When Israel was first established, immediate discrimination was thrown at non-European Jewish people. Exiled to deplorable neighborhoods and low-paying jobs, the Israeli Black Panthers began their fight against Zionism, a fight that persists today. The Black Panther movement influenced the world, exposing multitudes of racism that exist outside of America. With Pan-African principles as guideposts, Black liberation became a global issue and a global fight.
Meet Natural Cycles, the only FDA-cleared and CE-marked birth control app that's 100% natural, hormone-free, and side effect-free. Here's how it works. The app analyzes daily changes in your body temperature to find your fertile window, so you can plan or prevent pregnancy naturally. Natural Cycles is a clinically proven, non-hormonal birth control option that's 93% effective with typical use and 98% effective with perfect use. No synthetic hormones, just science. And if you're ready to start family planning, switching from preventing to planning a pregnancy is as easy as tapping a button. Plus, the Natural Cycles app makes tracking fertility easy. You can measure your temperature trends using an Oura Ring, Apple Watch, or our Bluetooth thermometer, which is free when you sign up for an annual subscription. Join over 4 million registered users who are taking control of their fertility naturally. Save 15% when you sign up with code RADIO15 at naturalcycles.com. That's Radio15 for 15% off today.
Today's podcast is sponsored by MIDI Health. At any given time, 61% of adult women say they want to lose weight. But for many, that's easier said than done. If you've had trouble losing weight, don't lose hope. MIDI Health uses a deep understanding of women's hormones and a combination of weight loss medications to create a customized plan for each user. MIDI Health can help you achieve more effective and sustainable weight loss by addressing hormone imbalances. MIDI can also prescribe proven weight loss medications that help you experience reduced appetite and increased feelings of fullness. When paired with hormone optimization, you're not just managing your weight, you're also supporting your body's natural processes, which means you can overcome those weight loss plateaus that in the past have been so difficult to move beyond. So if you're ready to combine the power of hormones with the power of weight loss medications, visit joinmidi.com today. Discover how this innovative approach can lead you to lasting success. That's joinmidi.com.
What does Black liberation look like to you?
I learned that Black liberation is an evolving process, how we see it and how it should be for any individual, because the more you learn is that your understanding of what that means, and it's not just two words to take over your communities, whatever those institutions are, political, economic, cultural, we have to be able to envision taking it over. Coming into the Black Panther Party, that vision of what liberation looks like continues to grow. The difference with the Black Panther Party was that we was solidifying a certain understanding about a by any means necessary approach, which came down to meaning we would be willing to defend all that we could gain into taking back our lives under this racist empire. So now Black liberation becomes more than old school nationalism. It becomes something different. It begins to reject old concepts of nation, nationalism. Black liberation is more than just a political economic thing. And to be able to see how past efforts excluded people, that it was tended to be very male dominated. And that meant that even my readings of feminism began to help me expand and to be able to see who has been left out. So now liberation becomes more holistic, more total, and there's now even a greater sense of urgency to make sure that those who are really trying to make this struggle happen be willing to change their lives in ways that they never imagined. I got to deal with my sexism. I got to deal with my depression. I got to deal with the other person's ego. I got to deal with all of that at the same time that the different versions of the counterintelligence program is out to destroy any efforts that we make to be free, you know. So I mean, that's kind of a long answer, but it's my constant desire to want to know more. And even when knowing more means I got to challenge some deep things within me and help others to see the deep things within them that can destroy our best efforts to pull ourselves together into that kind of liberation force that can actually free us under this empire.
I appreciate that. And I can see how your perspective started out in a certain way and it has shifted over time based on deep study and experience. I'm curious, what was the first political formation that you were a part of? Let's take it back there.
I kind of consider my entry into the liberation movement around the age of 13, 14. And this is the 1967 rebellions. And I'm from Plainfield, New Jersey. Plainfield's a small town. But during this massive uprising in different cities, especially with predominant Black populations all across the country, Plainfield had its uprising. And just very quickly, unique about Plainfield was that brothers and sisters had found out that there was a gun manufacturing place outside of the city. They were able to break in there and bring back crates of M1 rifles. They actually ran the police out of the Black community. School year starts, and this was just 6 days now, but when the new school year started, that sense of Black power, that sense of nationalism was widespread. And we didn't have Black history. And so the students in the high school and junior high school, we marched to City Hall and demanded that we wanted Black history. And we actually won it. So it was, again, this thing about the Black power, Black nationalism were telling us what we could do instead of hearing that narrative about what niggas can't do. And I don't know if I can use that word, but that whole kind of mentality about what we can't do, who we are, and all the negative senses that go with that started to just break down. So the first formation actually was us pulling together this march on City Hall. Then after that, and it didn't even come under any name, but now we're meeting down at certain community centers, you know, to kind of continue to raise consciousness, to hear speakers, and stuff like that, and to begin to fight in other areas. Then later, by our junior year in high school, we hear about the Black Panther Party. So the Black Panther Party was the first one that we actually consciously joined, specifically understanding what this was about. And that's where we went from there.
So you said this was about 67 initially, then a couple years later. So this was at the peak of the civil rights movement that was taking place across the country. You were attracted to the part of the movement that was more focused on self-determination, more focused on control of the community. What made it so you were led in that way, as opposed to what I think the mainstream was trying to put as a safer option, which was the more integrational assimilations approach?
I mean, I actually think, at least my understanding also, the civil rights movement at the time, like if you're dealing with like 68, 69, the civil rights movement's effectiveness was probably on the decline, and the Black Power movement and that kind of consciousness was on the rise. You would see the growth of a lot of Black nationalist organizations, Black cultural organizations. You'd be exposed to the newspapers and the speeches and the stuff like Stokely Carmichael, H. Rap Brown, and voices like that. And us being able to understand the civil rights movement, and this may be more of a northern urban thing, or at least an urban thing, urban experience with a lot of young folks like myself and others, we wasn't that keen on the kind of struggles of sit-ins, marches, where we're just waiting there to be attacked, washed down the street with water hoses, spit on, and all like that. Not that, they didn't have their effectiveness, and you really understand them. You got to respect it. But many of us wanted to fight back. We wanted to know that it was right to fight back, to not accept that. So when we heard about first the voices of Stokely Carmichael and H. Rap Brown, but then the Black Panther Party was actually one of the early groups to just present themselves in an armed way. Many of us was seeing that as, I want to join that. I want to be a part of that. They stood up. I remember them during the uprising when they was fighting back and taking over things. And that was definitely me. And that's definitely, some of my comrades. And we were all high school students and friends at the time. But we wanted to know more about that Black Panther Party. And it was a critique of the civil rights movement, because we felt like the civil rights movement was asking too much. It was begging too much. It was willing to make compromises with forces that was just totally unethical, evil. That you could not really trust after all these generations of their one line, we are in charge of the world, we white folks are in charge of the world, and that's the way it's going to be. We wanted to know we could fight back and we could win. And television at the time did play a part, because there ain't but a few channels, but we was able to see what was going on in Africa, Asia, Latin America. We was able to see the Vietnamese fighting back against this massive empire, and people were winning. And Malcolm had always said, stop seeing yourself as a minority. We're not a minority. We're the majority, people of color. And that helped us to see how we had kind of locked ourselves into a mindset to only operate from a minority perspective. And joining the Panther Party allowed us to read more, and then the concepts of guerrilla warfare came in. And we was able to see that those were the weapons of the weak in the fight against the powerful. And the Panther Party made sense, because it was like through these organizings, through the survival programs, through raising the consciousness and building alliances with others, coalitions, the Black Power conferences, the joining in the civil rights movement activities, but the anti-war movement, the struggles of the Puerto Rican independentistas, the Chicanos with Aztlan, the poor white folks, even in the Appalachian Mountains. It made it really feel like, man, this is coming together. This is really coming together. And it pushed us on.
So you mentioned the coalition building with other ethnic groups and other political formations. I'm curious as to your experience there, because one of the challenges that I've seen play out and discussed is that, when a group doesn't have clarity around their particular interest in their agenda, then it can be co-opted through coalition building. So I'm curious about your experience with that as you were working in collaboration with these other groups.
I think one thing that stood out about the Black Panther Party was that we were willing to work with any other movement or formation that saw itself in a revolution or liberation struggle, or even if it was in terms of fighting for the rights of women, against sexism and things like that. So what we learned, and I'm gonna tell you, when I joined the Black Panther Party, I was probably more of the Black nationalist that did not want to work with white folks and didn't like white folks. And not that I had all that. It's interesting. I don't think I had that many encounters with, as far as friendships with white folks, maybe a few. But Panthers would come to Plainfield to help us They would kind of walk us through what it meant to be a Panther, walk in through the streets and through the communities. And we would learn from them like how to discuss Black Panther politics, how to help people bring up the issues that were important to them. And that was just like in the Black community. But then outside of that, we would also attend like an anti-war movement. And we had to be very clear on like what's the politics of the anti-war movement and what's ours. And it was important that they know ours and that we understood theirs. But ours, for us, was the priority: the liberation of Black people and revolution in America. Eldridge would say, and talk about the revolution of the colony, liberation of the colony, I'm sorry, and revolution in the mother country. The interactions with white folks here had kind of forced me to confront my own narrowness in certain ways around not dealing with white folks. But then here also, New York, New Jersey, the Latino community is a Latino community. So you begin to meet and develop relations with the Puerto Ricans, especially those of the independentista movement. They want independence. Just the idea of Puerto Rican and independence, you never even thought of that before. Puerto Rico, you never even thought, but now you begin to see how the tentacles of this monster just reaches out and just takes so many people's lives. And then here we are meeting folks from the indigenous nations, American Indian movement, and then depending where you're at, if you're out in the West Coast, it's more likely you're going to meet folks from the Chicano movement. But it helped me to understand that our sense of nationalism must be broad enough to see others in relation to you too, and not just be exclusively concerned about, yourself or your own people. So in many ways, I had to like revise my understanding, some ways maybe even reject. And because the Panthers also put out a policy around the oppression of women, even at our young ages, I ain't saying we did perfect, but at least put it on our mindset that that's a concern of the revolutionary, that you do not oppress women. And so we would do the best we could in our localities to make sure that we wasn't operating off of a lot of sexism. I'm not saying that we were perfect, but I think we were one of the first movements to at least put it on the board, put it in front of your consciousness so that you know how important this is. And I feel like I've been growing from that kind of being open, to stuff I may not have saw, to the blind spots ever since.
A massage chair might seem a bit extravagant, especially these days. 8 different settings, adjustable intensity, plus it's heated, and it just feels so good. Yes, a massage chair might seem a bit extravagant, but when it can come with a car, suddenly it seems quite practical. The all-new 2025 Volkswagen Tiguan, packed with premium features like available massaging front seats, it only feels extravagant.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. From streaming to shopping, Prime helps you get more out of your passions. So whether you're a fan of true crime or prefer a nail-biting novel from time to time, with services like Prime Video, Amazon Music, and fast free delivery, Prime makes it easy to get more out of whatever you're into or getting into. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to learn more.
So you mentioned Black nationalism and how your political view was changing then and it's transformed over time. And I read one of your pieces, I think this was from 99, Beyond Nationalism, but Not Without It, where you dig into this a little bit more as well.
Right. Even at the time that I wrote that, when I look back, I can see how I'm going and what direction I'm heading. In prison, I'm reading feminism, stuff around feminism for the first time, and critical thinking, and different things that were allowing me to critique myself in the movements that I had been involved with. When I got to anarchism and began to like really studying anarchism, like what is this thing with anarchism? Why is it so against authority? Why is it so it was something about the anarchism that was more life affirming, that was more willingness to come out of the box, to explore other ways of functioning, that at the time, coming from the Panther Party and the split in the Panther Party in 71, it allowed me to look at the split in the Black Panther Party in a totally different way, as a struggle around hierarchy, as a struggle around Huey P. Newton and his crew having all the power in Oakland, and the chapters on the localities of the Panther Party suffering because of that, you know. And I lived in Jersey and was able to witness firsthand the conditions of the Panther Party chapters in Jersey City and Newark. And they were constantly complaining because the monies that they would raise for the party would go to the Central Committee in Oakland, and a certain percentage comes back to the chapters to help them pay the bills and be able to run other programs, and that wasn't happening. And then here you got Geronimo Pratt and the Panther 13, I think at the time, and others who were getting expelled because they would critique and speak out to the Central Committee, but in speaking out, they would get expelled. So the anarchism was allowing me to see that as what happens when power is centralized, when power is in the hands of a small group, and it's now them that make the decisions about what is going to happen and what's not, and it always tends to just benefit them with the power. So in prison, and when I'm reading these other things, that is saying, man, here's the critique, but also saying that here's other examples of how it could have functioned and help possibly remain healthy as an organization and a movement. You got to get away from hierarchy. You got to get away from the mindsets that say, well, there's a few of us big brain, you know, ideological people, and the masses of members, you just need to follow orders. And I've found that to be fundamentally wrong and oppressive itself. And here are these readings that are saying, yeah, man, that's what happened to many of the movements, Russian Revolution, Cuban Revolution, all these other ones. And then you start to see it in the African liberation movements, that all these successes that they had made, especially in terms of the role of women, began to reverse once they won, because now you got a small group of men have decided that they got to be the ones to make it. So I wanted to move beyond that. I wanted to be a part of work that would help get away from hierarchy, get away from the head of the snake can get chopped off by the counterintelligence program, and here's the body just laid out, you know, vulnerable to all the forces of oppression. Because that's what happened to the Black Panther Party. But it also allowed me to see that individually we need to work on those things we have internalized in our oppression. So in writing the Beyond Nationalism, beyond because we got caught up into a nationalism that was very Eurocentric, but maybe tweaking it here and there. You know, we never dealt with the issues of the sexism involved, or just adopting old structures or understandings of what nation looks like. We got to be able to go beyond that, but we can never forget that our primary responsibility is the liberation of Black people. And that for me means that we can't, you know, you can't do without it, but you got to be able to critique even nationalism. What does our liberation need to look like in order to create really free societies wherever Black folks are, They got to be really, and let's not just reproduce Eurocentric models that we have not even considered putting on the board to have our attention. So that is me. That was me then in 90 something. And I think just now it's like, even at this point, I just feel like I keep deepening my understanding of that, you know, because when I look at struggle now, whether it's, you know, Black Lives Matter and different things, have we dealt with how we react to a Black Lives Matter that is led by Black women and LGBTQ folks? You know, have we dealt with folks that still want to be able to have land and control land? You know, have we dealt with the issues of internalized oppression? Have we factored ways into our organizing and how we deal with each other that deals with, in a sense, the shit that we have taken on by being here for 400 years? You know, so it still goes into that, because whatever happens in this country, indigenous folks and Black folks, Chicano folks included, we're going to be on the bottom. And if we can't see how to get up from under this, and that it has to happen at the death of this empire, we stay here. We stay, and it's another generation. And my concern now is, like, when you deal with the environmental destruction of the planet, there ain't gonna be too many more generations. So there's a sense of urgency that keeps building.
I'm curious, when it comes to anarchism, you know, what does history tell us about Black folks successfully practicing that practice and that perspective throughout history, perhaps before, you know, we were in this American experience?
Okay. I don't think to this day you're going to have any successful movements of Black folks that are led by or inspired by anarchist principles or anarchist understandings. One of the draws for me, what drew me to anarchism, was in studying how earlier African societies didn't have a state. They operated in more collective fashions. And even in those, like, I think it might have been amongst the Igbo in Nigeria, even though they may have had a king, they also had a saying that everyone is a king. And then then one of the examples that I have learned about in terms of one of their struggles against the British was that there was a certain point, this is the 1800s, that the women felt that the British, the Igbo men wasn't doing enough to stop the Brits from trying to colonize them. And at a certain point, the women got together and say, well, then we're going to step up and take over. And because they had kind of communal mechanisms and collective mechanisms amongst themselves, they was able to get together in ways that was non-hierarchical, that was more vertical, and begin to develop forms of resistance against the British. One of them that became known was called sitting on a man. And sitting on a man was like there may have been a British official set up at a certain location, and they got their flunky Igbo followers trying to prop up as leaders, and the women would just surround them and it's called sitting on a man, because it was just physically stop them from being able to come out and carry out their colonial functions. And I think that we have certain similar forms of that we can see today when you talk about sit-ins or whatever, but the women use some of their own cultural tools. And then in my being in Mexico, and trying to learn about the Zapatistas at the Southeast Mexico. And when the Zapatistas took over also, they don't even go as an anarchist movement, but they had conscious efforts to be as inclusive in their leadership as they could. and especially involving the women and all the different groups of peoples within Mayan culture. And when I saw them do that in these non-hierarchical forms, not vertical, but horizontal, they would sit when it was decision-making time, and the decisions would be sometimes for days, and it would not end until they had consensus. It was a different word that I hadn't been exposed to, consensus. And they had to come out of there with people on agreement of what page are we on and how are we going to oppose the efforts of the Mexican government to take this land back from us that we just took back for ourselves, and it was their own lands. And so I'm like, well, we can do that.
This is Marshawn Lynch. On Prize Picks, being right can get you paid. So I'm here to make sure you don't miss any of the action this football season. With Prize Picks, it's good to be right. With millions of members and billions of dollars awarded in winnings, Prize Picks is the best place to put your takes to the test. The app is really simple to use and available in 40 plus states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. Just pick 2 or more players across any sport, pick more or less on their projections, and if you're right, you can cash in. With simple stats and fan-friendly policies, Prize Picks is the best place to make your picks. Most importantly, they don't play about your paper. All transactions on the apps are fast, safe, and secure.
Download the Prize Picks app today and use code SPOTIFY to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code SPOTIFY to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. Must be present in certain states. Visit prizepicks.com for restrictions and details.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
When you describe a movement that is leader, I guess would you say leaderless, or that everyone is a leader to themselves?
That term comes up, the leaderless term comes up, but also the understanding of leadership that is more provisional, that it may be circumstances call for leaders in different ways, in different places, different circumstances, but that those people who come forward to that, they should not take it as they're now wedded to this for life, that it should always constantly be trying to raise others to be thinking, to be feeling, to be conscious of the techniques to bring in more folks, bringing in constantly. So there's not that tendency to there's just a few. And then here's your enemy who is staying up on everything you're doing, just looking for the opportunity to chop that head off, but when it is horizontal, it's harder to do that. And that was one of the things about the Igbo Women's War is what it was called, about them, because they were horizontal. You capture a few women here and you think that you got it, but no, because they had spread it out, it was harder to crush that movement. And that became very important, and democracy, real democracy plays a part, because those who coming into these kinds of settings, they need to feel that you see them. They need to feel that you hear them. They need to experience what it is to be in that kind of conflictual debates around which way to go or what to do. That the messiness and all this stuff is a part of what this is about, but we're able to still work through it. And if you get away from the more, I want to say not necessarily narrow, naive concepts of how organizing has to go or what revolution needs to look like, because it's a messy process.
Brother Ashanti, so when looking at movements today, I have heard in the space folks discuss this leaderless movements of decentralized authority. What are your broad thoughts of the effectiveness of the state of the movement today?
I sit home sometimes depressed because it's like what I don't see, but then I have to, what am I looking at? What am I looking at? You know, and at them times where I'm feeling like, oh man, there's not much going on. Someone will call me or text me or email me, say, oh, you should check out this, you should check out that. And then I have to stop, like, wait a minute, there's always going to be struggle. There's always going to be struggle. Now, I will admit, I want to see more of certain things, you know, and I think that certain thing is really, you know, an understanding that we can't be free as long as this empire breathes, that we have to be able to envision freedom without this empire existing, because the empire is what's killing us and has been killing us. And that's on that level because it makes you face death. It makes you face what this system will do to you if you dare stand up to it. Yet, that facing death does not have to be something morbid. It really has to do with you accepting a certain eventuality that actually allows you to embrace life. The life within you, the life within others, them little kids you see in the street who are still able to smile and laugh, you know, or you see that community garden popping up here, or that liberation school there, you know, or if there is a march or a demo, you know, like folks ain't stopped. But what I see signs of and would love to see more is embracing our people, even when there's a tendency amongst us who are more Black liberation, especially old school Black nationalists, of excluding certain of our peoples. And I really do mean, you know, like those who are from the LGBT community, our people, you know, and what it means that we still rejected them. What kind of understandings are we going? That's why the nationalism, you know, that what is a man, what is a woman, and how much of that is based on Eurocentric concepts, you know? Is that really what you want to do? Now, there's a part of that also that means that we have to let go of those things inside us that block us from feeling for other people. And for me, there's a spiritual thing in there. It's almost like saying, we got to embrace the mystery of life. We got to embrace that as we're struggling against this madness. We got to see all these forms of life as good, you know? And if we can't do that, then we shut off others. But shutting off others means we shut off aspects of ourselves and that can enable us to be freer, even in our own bodies, even in our own being, in that philosophical sense. So if I learn anything from like what we did back then, is that we constantly gotta look for broader understandings and deeper understandings of what revolution, liberation means, so that we are really, really getting to life. And like George Jackson say, man, like the words of George Jackson is pretty much, you know, in order to be free, we got to take this monster down. And I think when people hear us say that, they get a little nervous, but there's no other way out of it.
Ashanti Alston, thank you for joining us on Black History Year today.
Thank you so much for having me here. As we say in the Panther Party, all power to the people.
To learn more about our brother Ashanti Alston and his work on behalf of political prisoners with the Jericho Movement, visit thejerichomovement.com. Thank you for tuning in to another season of Black History Year. We hope you enjoyed the conversations. We hope you learned a lot. We hope you are applying what you learned. in your lives and the lives of your family and your community, so we can all learn from history and grow together to imagine a future where we can build a liberated world. At PushBlack, we agree with Marcus Garvey when he said, "A people without knowledge of their past, history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots." And I'm guessing you probably feel like that's important too. I mean, you're here at the end of a podcast about Black history. You matter. Your choice to be here matters. It lets us know that you value this work. And you make PushBlack happen with your contributions at blackhistoryyear.com. Most folks do $5 or $10 a month, but really everything makes a difference. Thank you for supporting the work. Black History Year is a production of PushBlack, the nation's largest nonprofit Black media company. Our team includes Tariq Alani, Brooke Brown, Tasha Taylor, and Lilly Workneh. Producing this episode, we have Cydney Smith and Lynn Webb for PushBlack, and Ronald Young Jr., who also edits the show. Black History Year's executive producers are Michael L. Sessa for Lemon House and Julian Walker for PushBlack. Peace.